In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a German shepherd named Max stood guard beneath an ancient oak tree. His bark echoed through the streets, day and night, for 6 straight days. Locals watched as this normally calm dog refused to leave his post, even during the worst storm their town had seen in decades. His owner Sarah tried everything: treats, commands, even his favorite toys. But Max wouldn't budge. On day 7, something in that tree would change not just Max's life, but the lives of an entire family forever. Local police had dismissed it as typical dog behavior. Animal control said Max would tire eventually. But they were all wrong. What happened next would shake this small town to its core and remind everyone why dogs are called man's best friend. This isn't just another story about a barking dog. It's a tale of instinct, persistence, and a discovery that left hardened emergency responders in tears. The truth about what Max found in that tree would make headlines across the country and prove that sometimes, when an animal tries to tell us something, we better listen. Max had always been a creature of habit. Every morning at 6 a.m., he'd walk the perimeter of Sarah's backyard, checking the fence line before settling on the porch for his morning watch. That's what made his behavior on that Monday morning so strange. Instead of completing his routine, Max froze halfway through, his ears perked toward the massive oak tree that had stood on their property for over a century. Sarah first noticed something was different when Max skipped breakfast. In 12 years, he had never missed a meal. He stood there, rigid, eyes fixed upward into the dense branches. His tail, usually wagging at this hour, hung stiff and alert. When Sarah called him, he responded with a short whine, but didn't move. By Tuesday afternoon, Max's bark had become hoarse, but he remained stationed under the tree. Sarah brought his water bowl to him, watching with growing concern as he took quick drinks between his constant barking. Neighbors started calling, first with complaints, then with worry. The Hendersons next door knew Max since he was a puppy. They'd never seen him act this way. Wednesday brought the first attempts to intervene. Sarah's son, Michael, Max's favorite playing partner, tried luring him away with his beloved tennis ball. Max wouldn't even look at it. The local vet, Dr. Thompson, stopped by to check on him. No signs of illness or distress, besides the obvious fixation with the tree. He suggested waiting it out, saying sometimes dogs fixate on squirrels or birds, but even he seemed unconvinced by his own explanation. Thursday hit differently. The weather turned brutal. Rain poured down in sheets, thunder cracked overhead, but Max stood his ground. Sarah set up a tarp, trying to give him some shelter. He had lost interest in food completely now, only accepting water when Sarah brought it directly to him. His barks had transformed into urgent, guttural sounds that sent chills down the spines of everyone who heard them. By Friday, the situation had taken over the neighborhood. Children stopped riding their bikes past the house. Joggers changed their routes. Something about Max's determination unnerved people. This wasn't normal dog behavior, and everyone knew it. His barking had developed a pattern now. 3 sharp barks, a pause, then 2 longer ones. Over and over, like a code nobody could crack. The weekend brought crowds. Word had spread through social media, and now curious onlookers drove by slowly, phones recording the spectacle of the dog who wouldn't leave the tree. Sarah had to put up barriers to keep people from wandering onto her property. Through it all, Max remained focused, his dark eyes fixed upward, his voice growing weaker but his determination unchanged. The local police finally took notice when Officer Dan Martinez, a K-9 unit handler, drove past Sarah's house on Sunday morning. He watched Max for 30 minutes, noting how the dog's behavior differed from typical animal fixation. This wasn't about a squirrel or a stuck cat. Max's body language spoke of urgency. Martinez called in additional K-9 units. 3 police dogs and their handlers arrived at the scene. The dogs' reactions changed everything. Instead of barking or showing aggression, all three German shepherds sat at attention, their behavior mirroring Max's focused intensity. One handler, with 20 years of experience, said he'd never seen anything like it. The fire department brought their thermal imaging cameras. In the dense summer foliage, the equipment proved useless, the leaf coverage too thick to get clear readings. They needed a closer look, but the oldest branches weren't stable enough to support a climber's weight. A tree specialist declared the upper sections too dangerous for conventional inspection. Sarah allowed news crews on her property now. The story had caught the attention of local networks: the devoted dog, the mysterious tree, the failed attempts to solve the puzzle. But Max remained oblivious to the cameras and crews. His barking continued, though now it came out as a raspy whisper. Professional climbers from the State Park Service arrived with specialized equipment. The first attempt to reach the higher branches ended in failure when their ropes disturbed a massive hornet's nest. 2 workers suffered multiple stings. Max never flinched, even as insects swarmed around him. His focus remained unbroken. By day 8, Sarah's yard had transformed into a command center. Police tape marked off a perimeter around the tree. Environmental scientists arrived with sophisticated listening devices, hoping to detect any wildlife in distress. Their equipment picked up something, but the readings made no sense. The frequencies they detected didn't match any known animal sounds. The local university sent a team of veterinary behavior specialists. They documented Max's patterns, noting how his barking changed whenever someone approached certain sections of the tree. One expert suggested Max might be responding to ultrasonic frequencies humans couldn't hear. Another proposed he might be reacting to subtle vibrations in the ground near the tree's roots. A drone operator volunteered his services, offering to send a small camera up through the branches. The first drone crashed when its propellers tangled in smaller branches. The second one captured blurry images of something unusual in the upper canopy, but no one could agree on what they were seeing. The footage went viral, sparking wild theories online. As day 9 began, Max's dedication had captured national attention. Major news networks picked up the story. Social media exploded with theories. Animal behaviorists flew in from across the country. But through it all, Max's determination never wavered. His vigil continued, his message urgent but still unclear. Something was up there. Something important enough to make a loyal dog forget everything except his self-appointed mission. On day 10, the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 13-year-old Emily Chen, whose father was documenting the event for a national news channel, noticed something everyone else had missed. While reviewing her father's footage on his professional camera, she spotted a slight movement in the highest branches, something that didn't match the wind patterns. The fire department brought in their largest ladder truck. The extension reached higher than their previous attempts, but still fell short of the area of interest. They needed something more specialized. A construction company volunteered their crane, typically used for building skyscrapers. As they set up the massive equipment, the entire neighborhood held its breath. Max's behavior shifted. His barking became more urgent, almost frantic. For the first time in 10 days, he began pacing beneath the tree, alternating between looking up and staring at the crane. Sarah noticed tears in his eyes, something she'd never seen before. The veterinarian on site confirmed Max was showing signs of extreme emotional distress. The crane operator, Tom Wilson, had worked high-rises for 20 years. But this job felt different. Hundreds of spectators watched as the crane's arm extended toward the ancient oak. News helicopters circled overhead, careful to maintain their distance. The world seemed to pause, waiting to discover what had driven Max to such extraordinary dedication. The first attempt to position the crane failed. The branches were too dense, creating a natural barrier. They needed to approach from a different angle. Each adjustment of the massive machine took precious time. Max's whines grew more intense with each passing minute. His pacing became more erratic, more desperate. Police cleared the area directly under the tree, creating a safe zone. Medical teams stood by, though no one could explain why they felt their presence might be necessary. The tension in the air was palpable. Even the most skeptical observers couldn't deny the feeling that something unprecedented was about to unfold. As the crane made its final approach, the wind picked up. Dark clouds gathered overhead, threatening to delay the operation. The crane operator had one chance to position the platform perfectly. Any mistake could damage the ancient tree, or worse. Max's eyes never left the crane's movement, his body trembling with anticipation. The platform finally reached its target zone. Two rescue workers, secured by safety lines, stepped onto the small metal surface. They carried specialized equipment, cameras, cutting tools, and medical supplies. No one knew what they might find, but they prepared for every possibility. As they ascended into the dense foliage, Max's barking reached a new level of intensity. Through helmet-mounted cameras, the ground team watched the rescuers' slow progress. The branches were thicker than expected, forming a natural fortress near the top of the tree. The workers had to cut through layer after layer of growth, some of it decades old. Each snap of a branch echoed through the tense silence of the crowd below. The first rescuer's voice crackled over the radio. "There's some kind of structure up here." The camera footage showed what appeared to be carefully woven branches, too intricate to be natural. Max's barking suddenly stopped. The silence was deafening. As the rescuers pushed through the last layer of branches, they found themselves staring at an abandoned eagle's nest, massive in size. But that wasn't what made them pause. Hidden within the weathered structure lay a metal case, covered in rust and tangled in decades of growth. The serial numbers were barely visible, but still legible. It was a safety deposit box from the central bank, which had burned down in 1963. The box wasn't alone. Beside it, protected from the elements by the dense canopy, sat a leather satchel. Time had worn away at its surface, but the initials remained clear: R.H. Inside, they found newspapers dated June 1963, and beneath them, stacks of photographs and letters. They belonged to Robert Henderson, Sarah's father, who had disappeared the same year the bank burned. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd been just 5 years old when her father vanished. The police had suspected foul play, but no body was ever found. The case went cold, leaving her family with nothing but questions. Now, 60 years later, her father's German shepherd, Max's grandfather, made sense. The old family stories about how their dog had barked at this same tree for days after Robert disappeared. As the rescuers carefully lowered the items, Max finally left his post. He walked to Sarah, pressed against her leg, and let out a soft whine. The safety deposit box, when opened by bank officials, contained evidence that would solve not just Robert's disappearance, but 3 other cold cases from the same era. The letters revealed a conspiracy that had shaped the town's history. Among the photographs was one of Robert with his German shepherd, standing proudly in front of the same oak tree. On the back, written in fading ink, "Duke knows. If anything happens, he'll remember. Dogs always remember." Sarah realized the truth. Max hadn't discovered something in the tree. He had remembered it, carrying the genetic memory of his grandfather's last watch. The town's police chief, fighting back tears, confirmed what the evidence suggested. Robert Henderson hadn't disappeared. He'd been silenced after uncovering corruption at the highest levels of the town's government. Before he was forced to flee, he'd hidden the evidence in the one place he knew his faithful companion would guard. The discovery shook the town to its foundations. 3 former city officials, now in their 90s, faced questioning. The evidence Robert Henderson had preserved solved 5 decades of mysteries. Local history books needed rewriting. But more importantly, Sarah finally had answers about her father's fate. Robert hadn't perished in 1963. The letters revealed he'd escaped to Canada, living under an assumed name to protect his family. He'd passed away peacefully in 1989, never knowing if his evidence would come to light. His final letter, sealed in the weatherproof case, contained a single line: "Duke will tell you when it's time." Somehow, through generations of his bloodline, that message had reached Max. The oak tree became a landmark overnight. News crews from around the world filmed segments beneath its branches. Scientists studied Max, fascinated by this possible case of genetic memory in dogs. Animal behaviorists wrote papers about inherited instincts and loyalty across generations. But Max returned to his normal routine, seemingly satisfied that his ancestral mission was complete. Sarah found herself accepting interview requests, sharing her story with millions. The town council unanimously voted to clear her father's name and establish a memorial in his honor. The old bank building, long abandoned, would become a museum dedicated to Robert Henderson's story and the unexplained bonds between humans and their canine companions. Max received medals from both the police department and the American Kennel Club. But the most meaningful recognition came from Duke's surviving puppies and their offspring, 47 dogs across 3 states, all descendants of the faithful companion who had first guarded Robert Henderson's secrets. When they gathered for a ceremonial photo, every single dog sat facing the ancient oak. The night after the discovery, something extraordinary happened. As Sarah sat on her porch watching Max during his evening patrol, she noticed him stop at the oak tree one last time. But instead of barking, he simply sat and looked up, tail wagging gently. In the fading light, Sarah saw what the crowds had missed: initials carved into the trunk, nearly hidden by decades of growth. D+R, always on guard. Later that week, when workers began cataloging the contents of Robert's satchel, they found one final photograph tucked into a hidden pocket. It showed a young Sarah playing with one of Duke's puppies. On the back was a message dated just days before Robert disappeared. "The truth sleeps in their blood. When the moment comes, they'll remember. They'll always remember." Max rested his head on Sarah's lap, his mission complete. But in kennels across town, Duke's descendants stood alert, their ancient instincts awakened. They watched the skies through their windows, guardians of secrets not yet revealed, waiting for their own moment to remember.